On a winter night in Chicago, the temperature drops to 5 degrees below zero, and 3 little girls are asleep on a piece of soggy cardboard beside a dumpster. They have been there since morning, 14 hours in that skin-slicing cold, waiting for someone, anyone, to care about them. Matteo Valenti thinks it is just a pile of discarded trash bags in a dark alley near one of his warehouses. He comes here for the ordinary work of a Mafia boss, a routine inspection. But as he gets closer, his heart seems to stop. It is not trash. It is 3 tiny girls, triplets about 7 years old, curled up and clinging to each other beneath a thin, filthy blanket. Their lips are purple with cold. Their skin is as pale as snow, faces streaked with dirt, small bodies trembling violently. Matteo has faced guns without blinking, but in this moment, the gun in his hand slips free and drops into the snow. Before he can say a word, one of them, Ella, lifts her head. Her eyes are full of fear. But what makes Matteo's chest tighten isn't the fear. It is the surrender, as if the child already knows how everything will end. She whispers, "Please, don't take us back. We'll be good." The other 2, Mia and Sofia, stir and add in trembling voices, "We promise we'll be good." Matteo stands frozen. He, the man who makes the entire city afraid, suddenly feels like he can't breathe. What have these children lived through that they believe they were thrown away because they weren't good? And then he sees it on each girl's neck, a small silver medallion dulled with age. In that moment, Matteo thinks only this: he will take them home, call someone to handle it, then return to his normal life with his son. Life will go on the way it always does. He has no idea that what is inside those medallions will change everything. If you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to subscribe and give this video a like. It really helps support the channel. We'd also love to hear from you. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Your support means a lot, and we truly value our community. Ella had a hand-shaped bruise on her upper arm, fingers clearly visible, as if someone had gripped her hard enough to leave a permanent claim. Matteo's hands curled into fists at his sides. Heat rose in his chest, sharp and familiar. The same fury he felt when someone crossed him in business. But this was different. This was personal in a way he had never known. Someone had taken these fragile, trusting children and turned them into frightened animals who expected pain from every hand that reached toward them. Elena's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she rinsed their hair. "Poor babies," she whispered. "Who could do this?" Matteo didn't answer. He couldn't. The words that rose in his throat were too dark, too violent. Instead, he stepped closer, kneeling beside the tub so the girls could see his face. "I'm going to find out who did this," he said, voice low and steady, the way he spoke when he made promises he intended to keep with blood if necessary. "And they will never touch you again. I swear it." Sofia looked at him then, really looked, her hazel eyes, so like his own, wide with something between hope and disbelief. She didn't speak, but her small fingers loosened their death grip on Ella's arm, just a fraction. After the bath, Elena wrapped them in oversized towels and fluffy robes that swallowed their thin frames. Downstairs in the kitchen, 3 bowls of chicken noodle soup waited on the table, steam curling upward like little promises of warmth. The girls sat close together, shoulders touching, as if separating even an inch might invite danger. They ate slowly at first, testing each spoonful as though it might be taken away. Then hunger won. Mia's spoon moved faster, broth dripping down her chin. Sofia reached over to wipe it gently with her sleeve. Ella watched Matteo the whole time, waiting for the moment he would shout or snatch the bowls. He didn't. He sat across from them, elbows on the table, chin resting on his clasped hands, simply watching. When their bowls were empty, he nodded to Elena, who quietly brought more. "You can have as much as you want," he said softly. "There's always more here." Ella's eyes filled suddenly, tears spilling over before she could stop them. She swiped at them angrily, as if crying were another weakness she couldn't afford. Matteo felt something crack inside his chest, something hard and long frozen. These girls, with their protective circle and their quiet terror, had already begun to unravel the man he had spent years building. And he knew, with a certainty that burned, that he would tear the world apart to keep them safe. The mansion had grown quiet after midnight, the kind of hush that settled only when the children finally slept. Matteo stood in the dimly lit study, the fire crackling low in the hearth. The triplets were upstairs in the guest room, tucked into one enormous bed because none of them would sleep alone. Their small forms had curled together instinctively, breathing soft and even at last. He poured himself a glass of scotch and stared into the flames, the weight of the evening pressing against his ribs, the bruises, the hunger in their eyes, the way they flinched at every raised voice or sudden movement. Someone had done that to them. Someone had broken 3 innocent children and then discarded them like yesterday's trash. The thought twisted in his gut like a blade. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Dante answered on the first ring. "Boss, I need you to run a check," Matteo said, voice low and controlled. 3 girls, 7 years old, triplets, names, Ella, Mia, Sofia, no last name, yet. Found them tonight, behind the old warehouse on Holstead. They've been beaten, starved, abandoned. I want to know who they are, who their parents are, and who the hell thought it was okay to leave them in the snow. Dante didn't ask questions. He never did when Matteo spoke in that tone. "On it. I'll have something by morning." Matteo ended the call and set the phone down. His gaze drifted to the small silver medallions he had noticed earlier, 3 identical pendants hanging from thin chains around their necks. During the bath, Elena had carefully cleaned them, and Matteo had caught a glimpse of something inside each one. A tiny latch, a hidden compartment. He crossed the hall to the guest room, easing the door open just enough to see them. The girls slept in a tight knot, arms and legs tangled protectively around one another. Moonlight spilled across the bed, catching the faint gleam of silver at their throats. Careful not to wake them, Matteo stepped closer. He reached down and gently lifted Ella's medallion, the metal cool against his palm. With the softest click, the front opened. Inside was a small, faded photograph. A woman with warm brown eyes and auburn hair smiled back at him. She looked tired but radiant, holding 3 tiny infants swaddled in hospital blankets. The resemblance was unmistakable. The shape of her jaw, the curve of her smile. Matteo's breath caught. Isabella. The name hit him like a fist to the chest. 7 years ago, she had vanished without a word. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. He had spent months searching, tearing through every lead, until grief and anger finally hardened into acceptance. She had left him. That was the story he told himself to survive. But the dates. The triplets were 7. Conceived 8 years ago. Right around the time he and Isabella had been together, before everything fell apart. He looked from the photograph to the sleeping girls. The same delicate nose, the same hazel eyes that mirrored his own, the same stubborn set to their mouths when they were frightened. Matteo closed the medallion with trembling fingers and stepped back, heart pounding. If these children were hers, if they were his, then everything he thought he knew about the past 7 years had been a lie. He slipped out of the room and returned to the study. The photograph burned into his mind. Dante would find the truth. And when he did, Matteo would know exactly who had stolen his family from him. And God help them when he found out. The clinic was quiet at this hour, the kind of sterile hush that amplified every heartbeat. Matteo sat in the private waiting room, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. He had come alone. No Dante, no bodyguards. This was something he needed to face without witnesses. The doctor entered with a thin folder in hand. Matteo stood before the man could speak. "Tell me." The doctor cleared his throat. "The probability of paternity is 99.999%. The triplets, Ella, Mia, and Sofia, are your biological daughters." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward until they reached every corner of Matteo's soul. He felt the air leave his lungs in a slow, painful rush. 7 years. 7 years of believing Isabella had walked away, taking whatever future they might have had with her. 7 years of hardening his heart until it felt like stone. He took the folder with numb fingers and opened it. The test results stared back at him. Cold, clinical numbers that changed everything. He looked at the photographs attached, side-by-side comparisons of the girl's features against his own. The same hazel eyes threaded with gold, the same slight upward tilt at the corners of their mouths, the same stubborn chin. Undeniable. Matteo sank into the chair, the folder trembling in his hands. He thought of the nights he had lain awake after Isabella disappeared, replaying every moment, every word, searching for the moment he had driven her away. He had convinced himself she had chosen to leave, that she hadn't wanted him or the life he could give her, but she had been pregnant with his children. The rage came next, slow and searing. He pulled out his phone and dialed the one person who had always known more than she let on. His mother answered on the second ring. "Matteo, it's late. Why did you lie to me?" His voice was quiet, but the fury beneath it made the line crackle. Silence stretched. Then softly, "What are you talking about?" "Isabella, 7 years ago. You told me she took money and left. You said she didn't want anything to do with me." Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was small. "She was going to ruin you, a girl from nothing, pregnant with twins, no, triplets. She would have dragged the family name through the mud. I couldn't let that happen." Matteo closed his eyes. "You told her I didn't want them, that I'd never accept them." "I told her what she needed to hear," his mother said, almost pleading. "I gave her money to start over. I thought it was mercy." Mercy. The word tasted like ash. Matteo thought of the bruises on his daughter's skin, the hollows in their cheeks, the terror in their eyes when they begged not to be taken back. Mercy would have been letting him know. Mercy would have been giving him the chance to protect them. "You stole 7 years from me," he said, voice breaking for the first time. "From them, from her." "Matteo." He ended the call. The phone clattered onto the table. He sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. Grief and fury twisted together until he couldn't tell one from the other. 7 years his daughters had lived without him. 7 years Isabella had carried the weight alone. 7 years someone else had hurt them while he built an empire on the bones of his broken heart. Finally, he stood. The folder went into his coat pocket like a promise. He would find Isabella. He would bring her home. And he would spend the rest of his life making sure no one ever hurt his family again. Not his mother. Not anyone. The hospital in Cleveland smelled of antiseptic and despair. Matteo moved through the corridors like a shadow, coat collar turned up, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. Dante had tracked her down in under 48 hours. Isabella Rossi, 31, admitted 3 weeks ago in critical condition, severe sepsis from untreated injuries, signs of prolonged physical abuse, coma, no visitors, no next of kin listed, room 412. The door was half open, soft beeps drifting out like a mechanical heartbeat. Matteo stepped inside and stopped. The woman in the bed was a ghost of the one he remembered. Her auburn hair lay dull against the pillow, cheeks hollow, skin almost translucent. Tubes snaked from her arms to machines that kept her tethered to life. Bruises still bloomed along her jaw and collarbone, yellowing now, but unmistakable. He crossed the room on legs that felt made of lead and sank into the chair beside her bed. For a long moment he simply stared, memorizing every line of her face, every scar that hadn't been there 7 years ago. Isabella, he whispered. The name felt foreign and achingly familiar at the same time. He reached out, hesitated, then gently took her hand. It was cold, fragile, the knuckles still faintly swollen. "I found them," he said, voice rough. "Ella mia, Sofia, they're safe. They're at the house with me. Luca's already trying to teach them how to play with dinosaurs." A tear slipped down his cheek. He didn't bother wiping it away. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know you were pregnant. My mother, she told me you left, that you took money and disappeared. I believed her. I hated you for it." His grip tightened slightly, careful not to hurt. "I was wrong. I should have searched harder. I should have known you would never leave me like that." The machines beeped steadily, indifferent. He leaned closer, forehead resting against their joined hands. "I'm bringing you home. I've already arranged everything, the best doctors, the best hospital in Chicago. You'll have a private suite, round-the-clock care, whatever it takes. I'm not losing you again, not you, and not our girls." He stayed like that for hours, speaking in low murmurs about the way Ella always positioned herself between her sisters and the door, about how Mia had smiled for the first time when Luca offered her a stuffed T-Rex, about Sofia's quiet stare that seemed to see straight through him. "I'm sorry," he repeated, over and over, "for every day you carried them alone, for every bruise, for every night you were afraid. I promise you this, no one will ever hurt you or our daughters again. I'll protect you, all of you, with everything I have." When the sky outside began to lighten, Matteo stood. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, lingering just a moment longer. "I love you," he said softly. "I never stopped." He left the room only long enough to make the final arrangements. Within hours, an air ambulance would transport her to Chicago. The best specialists were already waiting. And when she woke, if she woke, he would be there. Matteo stepped out into the cold morning air, the folder of medical records clutched in his hand like a vow. 7 years had been stolen from them. But the years ahead belonged to their family. He would make sure of it. The motel on the edge of Indianapolis looked like it had been forgotten by time. Peeling paint, flickering neon sign, the kind of place where people went to disappear. Matteo had come alone. No Dante, no backup. This wasn't business. This was personal. He kicked the door to room 17, open with one powerful blow. The man inside, Victor Russo, jerked upright on the sagging bed, eyes glassy from cheap whiskey and whatever else he'd been using to dull the edges of his life. Empty bottles and scattered white packets littered the floor. He fumbled for the gun under his pillow, but Matteo was already across the room, seizing his wrist and twisting until bone snapped. Victor screamed. The gun clattered to the floor. Matteo picked it up, studied the rusted barrel, then pressed the cold metal against Victor's temple. "You remember 3 little girls?" he asked, voice calm, almost conversational. "Ella, Mia, Sofia. You beat them. You starved them. Then you left them in the snow to die." Victor's face drained of color. Recognition dawned slowly through the haze. I didn't know they were yours. Isabella never said." Matteo slammed him against the wall, forearm across his throat. "They're my daughters, and Isabella is the woman you nearly killed." Victor choked, tears mixing with snot. "Please, I was drunk, angry. I didn't mean—" Matteo's free hand closed around Victor's throat, squeezing just enough to feel the pulse flutter beneath his fingers. The rage that had been simmering for days roared to life. Hot, blinding, familiar. He could end it here. One squeeze, one shot. No one would ever know. The world would be cleaner without this man in it. Victor whimpered, legs buckling. "I'm sorry. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." Matteo's grip tightened. Images flashed through his mind. The bruises on his daughters' backs, the way they flinched at sudden movements, the hollow terror in their eyes when they begged not to be taken back. He thought of Isabella lying in that hospital bed, tubes keeping her alive, because this man had broken her body and spirit. He could do it. He wanted to. But then he saw Ella's small hand clutching his sleeve in the bathroom. Mia's first tentative smile when Luca shared his toy. Sofia's quiet stare that seemed to ask, without words, if he would be different from the men she had known. If he killed Victor here, in this filthy room, he would carry that darkness back to them. He would become the kind of man who solved problems with blood, the kind of father who taught his daughters that violence was the only answer. Slowly, deliberately, Matteo released Victor's throat. The man collapsed to his knees, gasping. "I'm not going to kill you," Matteo said, voice cold as steel. "Not because you deserve to live, but because my daughters deserve a father who isn't a murderer." He pulled out his phone and dialed the local police. When the dispatcher answered, he gave the address, Victor's name, and a calm, precise report of child abuse, domestic violence, and attempted murder. He stayed until the sirens grew close, standing guard so Victor couldn't run. As the officers cuffed him and dragged him away, Victor looked back at Matteo with wide, terrified eyes. "You think this is over?" he spat. "I'll get out. I always do." Matteo met his gaze without blinking. "You'll go to prison for what you did to my family, and I'll make sure every day inside feels like hell." The door slammed shut behind them. Matteo stood alone in the empty room, the rage still burning but now channeled, focused. He had chosen mercy, not for Victor, but for his daughters, for the future he wanted to give them. He walked out into the cold night, the weight on his chest a little lighter. His family was waiting. The private suite in Chicago's finest hospital was bathed in soft afternoon light. Isabella lay still beneath crisp white sheets, the steady beep of the monitor the only sound until, suddenly, her fingers twitched. Matteo, who had been sitting beside her for hours reading reports he barely saw, froze. He leaned forward, heart slamming against his ribs. "Isabella?" Her eyelids fluttered, once, twice, then slowly opened. Warm brown eyes, hazy with confusion, found his face. Recognition dawned like sunrise. "Matteo?" Her voice was a cracked whisper, barely audible. He took her hand gently, tears already burning behind his eyes. "It's me. You're safe. You're in Chicago. The girls are here." Isabella's gaze sharpened. "The girls? Ella, Mia, Sofia?" "They're safe," he said quickly, squeezing her hand. "They're waiting right outside. I brought them." A nurse slipped in, checked vitals, then stepped out to give them a moment. Matteo helped Isabella sit up slightly, propping pillows behind her. When the door opened again, 3 small figures hesitated in the doorway. Isabella's breath caught. Tears spilled instantly down her cheeks. My babies. Ella stepped forward first, then Mia and Sofia, their eyes wide and shining. They ran to the bed, climbing up with careful urgency, burying themselves against their mother. Isabella wrapped her thin arms around all 3, sobbing openly now. "I'm so sorry," she whispered into their hair. "I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. I tried so hard." The girls clung tighter, their own tears silent but soaking her hospital gown. Matteo stood back, throat tight, watching the reunion he had dreamed of for days. After long minutes, Isabella lifted her head, looking at him over the tops of their daughters' heads. "How did you find them?" Matteo sat on the edge of the bed. "I found them in an alley, on trash. They were freezing, starving, covered in bruises." His voice roughened. Victor left them there. Isabella's face crumpled. He changed after we married. At first he was kind, but then..." She swallowed. "He hit me. Then them. I tried to leave so many times, but he always found us. When I got sick, he just disappeared with them. I thought I'd lost them forever." Matteo reached out, brushing tears from her cheek. "You didn't. They're here, and he's in custody. He'll never touch any of you again." She looked at him, eyes searching. "Your mother. She came to me when I was pregnant, said you didn't want us, that we'd ruin you. She gave me money, threatened my family if I ever tried to contact you. I wrote letters, dozens. They never reached you." Matteo closed his eyes briefly. "I know. She told me you left. I believed her. I was a fool." Isabella shook her head weakly. "We both were. But you found them. You saved them. You saved me." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently to hers. "I should have searched sooner. I should have known. You're here now," she whispered. "That's what matters." The triplets watched them quietly, small hands still clutching their mother's gown. Ella looked between them, then at Matteo. "You're really our dad?" Matteo smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm your dad, and I'm never leaving again." Isabella pulled him closer, the 4 of them, 5 now, with the girls, forming a fragile, trembling circle. Forgiveness wasn't spoken aloud. It simply settled over them like sunlight after a long storm, quiet, warm, and long overdue. For the first time in 7 years, they were whole. The restaurant hadn't changed in 8 years. Same warm wooden booths, same soft jazz drifting from hidden speakers, same corner table where Matteo had first seen Isabella smile as she poured coffee for a stranger who would become the love of his life. Tonight, the place was closed to the public, just the 2 of them, candlelight flickering across the table, and the quiet hum of possibility in the air. Isabella wore the same red dress she'd worn on their first date, the one that still fit like a memory. Matteo had arranged everything, the exact meal they'd shared that night, the same bottle of wine. When dessert arrived, tiramisu dusted with cocoa. Matteo stood. She looked up, surprise blooming into something softer. "Matteo?" He dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. The diamond caught the candlelight like a captured star. "Isabella," he began, voice steady but thick with emotion. "8 years ago, I walked in here a man who thought he had everything under control. Then I saw you, and nothing was ever the same. 7 years ago, I lost you, lost us, because I was too blind to see the truth. But fate gave us a second chance. It brought our daughters back to me, and it brought you back to my side. I don't want to waste another day. I want to spend the rest of my life loving you, protecting you, building a home with you and our girls. Will you marry me?" Tears slipped down her cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak at first. "Yes," she finally whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the years they had lost and all the years they had found again. When they parted, the door opened and 3 small figures burst in, Luca leading the charge with a triumphant grin. "She said yes," he shouted. The triplets raced forward, throwing their arms around their parents. Matteo lifted all 3 at once, laughing through tears as Isabella kissed their heads. 2 months later, the mansion garden bloomed with late spring roses. White chairs lined a simple aisle. A flower-covered arch stood at the end, and the air smelled of fresh-cut grass and hope. The ceremony was small, intimate, just family, Mrs. Elena, Dante, and a few trusted friends. Luca carried the rings with solemn pride. Ella, Mia, and Sofia walked ahead as flower girls, scattering petals in white dresses that matched their mother's elegant gown. Isabella appeared at the end of the aisle, auburn hair loose and crowned with tiny blossoms, eyes locked on Matteo. He waited beneath the arch in a black suit, heart pounding the way it had the first time he saw her. Their vows were simple, spoken with trembling voices and steady love. "I promise to love you through every storm," Matteo said, "to protect our family and to never let you doubt you're my home." Isabella smiled through tears. "I promise to stand beside you, to build this life with you, and to remind you every day that miracles do happen." They exchanged rings, sealed the vows with a kiss, and the garden filled with applause and laughter as the children rushed forward, wrapping their parents in a joyful hug. Later, as the sun dipped low, the 5 of them stood together. Matteo and Isabella in the center, Luca between them, Ella, Mia, and Sofia on either side, arms around one another, smiling into the camera. The photograph would sit on the mantel forever, a reminder of the journey from darkness to light. That night, as the children slept and the house grew quiet, Matteo and Isabella stood on the balcony, her head resting on his shoulder. "From an alley on a freezing night to this," she murmured. Matteo kissed her temple. "Miracles," he said softly. "They show up when you least expect them." And in the warm glow of their new beginning, the family that had been broken and scattered finally stood whole. Proof that, even in the darkest nights, love could find its way home. If this heartwarming journey from a freezing alley to a loving family touched you, please give this video a big thumbs up to help spread the miracle.